budget players versus non-budget players. Who's more resilient? We're going to find out today.
You say that you're turning up, but we ripping the knob off. Boy, you got a buzz, my motherfuckers cannot walk. We just getting started.
So what's going on today, guys? It's your homie Dragon Master coming at you today. This video has actually been quite a few months in the making now, because this is a video that I've wanted to do for quite some time, but never really had the motivation to really get behind until me and a friend were talking earlier today. So just to kind of get down to brass tacks here, as you saw from the lovely little intro into the video, this is about budget versus non-budget duelists, and the fact of who is more resilient in that sense. Your typical budget player works, we're going to start with this, works with a budget of usually around $100, maybe $150. That's your typical budget player. Now, your non-typical budget player might be working with a slightly different budget. Me, for example, with my Galaxy Eyes deck, I spent well over $200. Matter of fact, I spent closer to $300 to get every card I needed for the deck. But I didn't do that all at one time. I actually had to space it out over... How long did it take me? I think it took me 2 or 3 months to actually get all the cards that I needed for that deck. Because some of them were pretty expensive, and even the cheaper ones, I didn't have, you know, the necessary fundage for it. You know, like honestly, out of all the cards that I needed, I think the cheapest ones that I needed to get a hold of were Galaxy Eyes, Tachyon Dragon, and Neo Photon Dragon. And even they weren't cheap. I think I got both of mine for around $15 a pop. Actually, no, I take it back. I got my Neo Photon for around $11, only because it was damaged. But regardless, that's not money I had right off the bat. It took me 3 or 4 months to get every card I needed. Excuse me. And I needed, you know, 3 copies of Galaxy Soldier. I needed a copy of the card Swordsman of Revealing Light. Sorry if I'm stuttering over myself here. I needed almost every Galaxy card out there. Every Photon card. Hell, even every Cypher card that I used to run in this deck, I needed to get a hold of. For the most part, I had a decent majority of the cards that were needed for the deck. Like, I had Galaxy Eyes, Cloud Dragon, I had Photon Dragon, I had already gotten a hold of number 62, I had already had a hold of Chaos number 107, I had not Dark Matter but Full Armor. You know, I'd already had these cards, so it was just getting the other cards that I needed for the deck. Like, I didn't have number 23 Lancelot, I didn't have number 38, I didn't have Cyber Dragon Nova or Infinity, and those 2 cards were, again, you know, cards that I didn't have the necessary fundage for at the time to get the deck to be where I wanted it to be at. And so I found myself having to settle for cards with similar effects, or would allow me to pull out combos of that deck in a similar manner. Case in point, prior to me getting a hold of sorry, I just had a brain fart there. Prior to me getting hold of Cyber Dragon Nova and Infinity, I wasn't really using that in any particular combo anyway. Didn't really have anything planned for it. So kind of help along with that, I was throwing cards into my deck like skill breakthrough, or breakthrough skill, I'm sorry, breakthrough skill. I was throwing in Solemn Judgment, Solemn Warning, just little odd and end cards like that to try to protect my ass from any effects of my opponent's monsters, or spell or trap effect, or whatever the case may be. Was I suffering? Yes. But it still allowed me to ultimately do what I wanted to do with the deck. I was still able to bust out some of my major combos for the deck, even though I wasn't utilizing the deck to its full power at that time. Once I eventually got all the cards, and again, this took me 3 months, I was able to then start coming up with combos that I'm sure people, have at the time had already come up with. One combo I did come up with that I wasn't seeing a whole lot of, and it surprised me at that fact as well, was a combo concerning Galaxy Eyes, Prime Photon Dragon, and Cyber Dragon Nova, because those two actually do work very well together, even though, hey, we got one Galaxy Eyes, we got one machine, and Cyber Dragon. But the ability of Cyber Dragon Infinity, being able to stop one spell, trap, or monster card effect per turn, actually saved my ass more times than not. And then, of course, there's number 62's ability, where he gains 200 attack points per rank of every Xyz monster out of the field. That comes in handy. One of my favorite times to use that combo, was in the situation where my opponent went before me and only had one monster out on the field. To me, that's a perfect situation, especially if I have every card in my hand necessary to summon out Cyber Dragon Infinity and then number 62. But nonetheless, again, I spent close to $300 on this deck over a period of 3, maybe 4 months. Just to get the cards I needed to get. And because of that, I had to be a little bit more resilient with the deck's construction up until the time where I got all the cards I needed. And really, I think that's what tends to separate budget duelists from non-budget duelists. Because whereas a budget duelist, your typical budget duelist, again, has a range of maybe $100 to $150 to work with to get all the cards that they need. Well, maybe not all the cards they need, but a decent amount of the cards that they need. Non-budget duelists, on the other hand, they have an unlimited budget. They can spend, $300, $400, $500 right off the bat, get every card they need for the deck, and they're set. And more often or not, and I did do a little bit of research in on this as well, it is always the decks out there, it's usually the decks out there that have a budget of somewhere around $200 to $300 plus that make it into meta. Now, there are a few exceptions. Like this year alone, there was actually quite a few exceptions where the decks, a good portion of the decks that were very popular in the meta, came in well under $100. There's decks that came in at $48. We have a couple of $55 decks, $40 decks, shit like that. But your typical deck, your typical top tier deck, runs in average of $500 plus. What's a good example of this? Luckily, I have the page up right here in front of me. So, we're going to go with the top 5 most popular decks as of October 2017. These are all decks from Dallas, keep in mind. Okay? So the first one here, I'm not going to name any names. I'm just going to say what the decks are and how much the duelist spent on these decks. So at the number 5 spot is Spiral. And the duelist who created this deck, who made this deck, spent $637 on this deck just, just because he had it. That's what I call a non-budget duelist. Coming at number 4 spot is a Kaiju Trickstars deck at $613. Now, there is going to be another video made where I'm going to talk a little bit more about how I feel about the Spiral and the new Trickstar monsters that are out and about, and what I feel they're ultimately going to do with our current standings as far as the competitive scene is concerned. But coming in at the number 3 slot is an Invoked deck. I've always knew the Invoked decks were fucking outrageous when it came to price. This duelist spent $891 on this fucking deck. You can't tell me he's a budget player. If he is, hey, kudos to him. If it took him months to get a hold of all these cards, that's fine. Because technically you're still a budget player at that point. But if you spent this kind of money straight out, that just goes to tell me, 1, you have no life, 2, you have unlimited funds, and 3, you're probably a fucking trust fund baby. Just saying. Okay? Just saying. But yeah, $891 for an Invoked deck. The top 2 decks. At the number 2 spot is another Spiral deck. This is a much more expensive version of this deck. This deck comes in at $222. $21 short of the number 5 spot Spiral. This Spiral deck at the number 2 slot comes in at $916. Holy damn. That's all I have to say is holy damn. And Konami wonders why they're seeing a decline in the number of people who are going to tournaments, because you have budget players going up against non-budget players, the players who have unlimited funds versus those who only have a limited fund. And those with the unlimited fund are spending in excess of $400 maybe $500 per deck, if not more than that. And you're wondering, and Konami again, you're wondering why the standings are down for each competition. Really? They're basically telling budget players to just be for fun players. But nonetheless, coming at the number 1 spot is a Trickstars deck. It runs in at $758. But this gets my point across, because again, non-budget duelists who are able to dish out this kind of money like that, have a distinctly unfair advantage against those who are budget players. But at the same time, it's the budget players who are more resilient, because we are the ones who say, hey, we like to build this deck. We don't have the fundage for it right away. So we are going to look at every option we have, whether it's in our own collection, whether it's, at a card shop. We're going to ask other duelists, their opinions on, I need to be able to do this with this deck, but I can't afford this, 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 and this. What can I do? What can I find that would be comparable to these cards in this deck? Case in point, with our recent ban list, we know that the Dinosaur deck got hit very hard, especially in its True King variant. And I have a friend who's very much in love with his Dino deck. He has spent endless hours of time just, researching into this deck, trying to make it better. He's done the True King Dino variant. He's done Yang Zing variants. He's done the True King Yang Zing variant of the Dino deck. He even experimented with Zoodiac in this deck at one point. And when he saw that it got hit on the ban list, he was pissed, especially with Miscellaneousaurus now being dropped down to 1. He was pissed. But at the same time, and as I told him, we are budget players. We are more resilient. We are going to look at every option we have to try to find cards that will essentially, in some way or another, give us that overall effect that, say, Miscellaneousaurus gave us. And that's what it all comes down to, really. Is, who's more resilient when it comes down to it. Yeah, the non-budget players have unlimited budget. They can spend $5, $6, $7, $8, $100 plus on a single deck to get every card they want in one swoop. While the non-budget players don't have that ability. But because we don't have that ability, we tend to look out at every option we have. Point blank. Does it suck for the non-budget players? Yeah, it sucks. Because we are still at a distinct disadvantage. While the non-budget players are just like, hey, we got everything we want. We can fuck you over and not care. My buddy, he's a big fan of a YouTuber called Team Samurai. Alright? He has told me today that he is about ready to stop watching Team Samurai, for the simple fact being that I believe my buddy said with just 9 cards, he built this deck, and these 9 cards ran, like $300. To your typical non-budget player, $300 is nothing. To a budget player, $300, that's fucking food on our plate for a week, if not longer. Me personally, $300, I can go to Save-A-Lot right now and put food in my house that's going to last me about a month. But that's just me. I have to think about, what I need at the time. It's not just a matter of, hey, I have $300, my rent's due, my phone's due, and I need to put food in the house. But I also need these cards. So it's like, I'm not going to be like, oh, I gotta have these cards no matter what. I'll risk getting kicked out of my house. I'll risk going hungry. I'll have my phone shut off. I don't have that option. I don't pay my rent. I'm done. I get kicked out automatically. My phone is my lifeline. And then I have to eat. I'm a big boy. I have to fucking eat, people. Okay? So, yeah. Does being a budget duelist make me a shitty duelist? No. No. I'd rather be a budget duelist. than a non-budget trust fund brat who literally gets everything they want handed to them. I know duelists out there who do the whole Yugi-tubing thing. That's how they pay for their cards. That's how they, pay their bills. Shit like that. I respect them because they are using their sponsorships, the money that they make from the people that sponsor them, to buy their cards. They are still working. They are still working. They are still making their money. They're paying their bills, they're getting their cards, and they're still pumping out great material. I have a great deal of respect for you guys. But for all of you duelists out there who are trust fund brats, who have no budget, who live at home with your parents and are still able to spend $500-$600 at a time on a deck, or even $300 on 9 cards. You're not better than me because you have unlimited funds. You're not better than my buddy just because you have unlimited funds. Our decks might be considerably weaker than yours. Our decks can be slightly weaker than yours. But when it comes down to it, me and my friend can build a deck that'll still run circles around even your best and most expensive decks. Because we're that fucking resilient. And because we don't follow the trend. We are genuine with what we do. Every strategy we think of is our own strategy. Every combo is our own. We look at deck profiles, we tear them down, we build them, we make them better, we make them our own. We follow no set recipe. We follow no set strategy guidelines. We follow no set combo list. I can build right now a Galaxy Eyes Blue Eyes deck. You guys, tell you straight off the bat, it's a Galaxy Eyes Blue Eyes deck. Because of the history with a Galaxy Eyes Blue Eyes hybrid deck, you're automatically going to assume that you know every card in that deck. And I'll guarantee you, the first time I pull a card out that you're not familiar with, you'll shit yourselves. I can build a pure Blue Eyes deck right now. And for the most part, card for card, nearly have an identical deck to that's meta, mainstream, whatever the hell you want to call it. But as soon as I pull out a card you're not familiar with being in that deck, you're going to shit yourself. The standard thing for a Blue Eyes deck especially is there's no traps ran in it. Guess what? I run traps in mine. And it's still just as powerful as any mainstream Blue Eyes deck out there. Plain and simple, guys. Just because you're non-budget doesn't mean that you're better than me. I'm more resilient. Now, am I saying I'm better than you? No. I can get my ass handed to me just like anyone else can. But because I'm more resilient, and because I can make better use of my money while I have what I have, I can make a deck that would give even your most expensive decks one hell of a run for their money. Plain and simple. So that's it for this video, guys. As always, like and subscribe to the channel if you found this to be, entertaining, helpful, whatever. I have started up a Dragon Master Facebook page. I'll make sure to leave that link in the description for you guys. And until next time, it's your boy Dragon Master signing out. I will see you guys later. Peace!